Across the Pond.
Welcome, everyone, to Across the Pond, the podcast that dares to uncover the mysteries lurking beyond the veil of reality. From government cover-ups and secret experiments to hauntings, cryptids, and UFO encounters, we explore the unexplained and the conspiracies that keep them hidden. And today we are here, of course, with UAP Lee, the one and only, the notorious one, and our guest, Richard Short. This is a very last-minute podcast, but this is absolutely going to be a good one, guys. Thank you for getting here. Thank you for joining us, Richard. Thank you for first of all doing what you do, and for everyone who doesn't know you yet, what exactly do you do?
Well, across the pond. So here in the UK, very well-known activist from the public eye, documentary maker, video maker. But the most important thing that I've always put my efforts into is the failings upon the children across the world, not just in this country, due to the structure and the system that we're all born into. And it's actually a horror show. So many years back, I got involved with all of that and started looking at things deeply. And once you do that, it is that case of the red pill, blue pill. Once you've done it, you can never turn back, and you'll never look at the world the same ever again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
and we were just talking off air then, just before we got started. The thing that sort of drew me to this topic originally was my missus got into this. She, I can't remember how she did. She just stumbled upon it, and then obviously with the Epstein thing starting, and that took her took her very far down. And she got into this case, and the reason why I messaged you was just because I seen something that you shared that referred to it, and it just triggered something. And I thought, I've got to get you on because this is a big topic at the moment. A lot, and a lot of people in the world feel like a lot about this has been suppressed. And information is hidden, people are silenced, and like many other topics that we discuss on this podcast, somebody, i.e. potentially the deep state maybe, and various other people are trying to shut this stuff down and stop the public from learning about it, and various distractions perhaps are being thrown up into the air. And I wanted to get you on because like we've already mentioned, you've gained notoriety now for basically speaking what your version of the truth is, and you're sharing information with people, normal people like us, that need to know about what is happening. And obviously what you think you're saying is very important, and we wouldn't have got you on if we didn't sort of align ourselves with information being important in that realm as well. So, you said that you got into it, and once you took the pill, that was it. But once you started dipping your toe down the rabbit hole, I mean, what did it uncover, and what made you want to go further from there?
It's important to know that my journey is actually, I suppose I had a bit of a privilege with how it all began. It began because of religious studies. And then that's really where these things start to, unravel from. But the religious studies began because when I left school, I never had to do religious studies in school. When I left school, of course, I'm aware of all the different mainstream cultures. I had friends from most of them. And I had that question as a simple question. If I was going to be a part of a religion or believe in a God, so to speak, which one would I get involved with, and start looking into him? But very early on, I learned that if I had a whole lifetime just studying Christianity, for example, or even Islam, you still wouldn't have enough years in your life to know everything about it. So then it made me realise that religions are actually just a title for what I would class as now as a cultural background. Most people on the earth are born into a cultural background, or because of their parents being a specific culture, they then carry that religion or that title. But it's cultural backgrounds. The religions themselves being the cult, if you want to call it, in every case, they come with rules and regulations. They come with the idea of how they put it out. So that's why they're then titled as religion. It's taking a cultural background and then putting the foundation in place, which is how they allow to call themselves churches and temples and so on. Well, anyway, from an early age, of course, just through normal, news and mainstream and word of mouth, common knowledge, you hear a lot about the church and how they have a very strange taste for boys. It never made sense. Like, why is it like so many of these people that work for churches are interested in little boys? You don't hear about churches raping little girls. It's always little boys. And that's something that triggered then a deep dive into why. So we also understand from a different cultural sort of outlook, you know, for example, Islam. We know that a lot of people that are, you know, Muslims and stuff, we have these sort of gangs and stuff, but you don't hear about them touching boys. They're always, you know, younger girls. So again, it's a cultural thing. There's something going on behind it, which we can answer a lot for. For a quick cap on that, you know, why do the Muslims have their sort of taste in that category? It's generally because their Prophet Muhammad allegedly married his wife Aliyah at 9, embedded her when her biological body and said it's ready, and apparently that was 2 years on or something, and she was 11. So in their belief, they have that reasoning to say, look, when the woman bleeds, basically that's the biological body, which has no law as such, it has no regulation. When it does that, the body's telling you it's ready to reproduce. So in their argument, that's been twisted over the centuries now. And of course, they're living in the Western world and they're like, that's not right because we have the age limit of 16. Other places have different age limits. But that's where that came from, that issue. The church issue has a bit more of, I suppose, not a Masonic sort of layout, but what it is, imagine the Freemasonry orders of the earth. One of which would be known as the Templars. Now, a lot of these Masonry orders and, you know, even like the Golden Dawn, if you look at the Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley, you know, even he's written in his own archives about, you know, in 1 year alone, he had over 120 boys. And his belief was understanding sex rituals through sodomy, you know, from doing that to boys.
Yeah.
So by him doing that process, he believed it gave him access to magic powers and, you know, magic of the mind. You'd be able to foresee things, and it, you know, did certain things to him. Opened up channels, if you want. Whereas from the Templars' point of view, to be like, you know, generally a high up position in the church and to run a church, being a Templar, one of the main rules, like everything has its rules and layouts. So the Hermetic Order, you know, rule number 1 is that all is mind, universe is mental. Well, in the Templars, one of the rules are, and it's written quite nastily, that basically it's forbidden and you will seek death before you allow yourself to touch another woman ever again in your life. So for some reason, it's drummed into him to never be allowed to touch women ever again. And the words that are tied into it are quite strong, and it's to make a point to those that join that order. You are now celibate for the rest of your life from women. But it's written in that order that if a brother or brethren is to suffer and struggle with these changes, then they're allowed to help each other out. And it's forgiven and accepted, if you want. So in their eyes, this is why you see it so much in the church. It's run under the same methodology, so their brains know not to touch women, even though they can go and get married and certain things they can do in life. But it appears to be they have that taste for that boy, you know, for boys, because of that purpose. Then there's the DNA memory. When people become a certain character in life, you know, let's just say my life, I've become a warrior. And it's almost like I have a duty to the rest of my life now. No, I do not fear death, and I'll always be a warrior till death. If I was brought up by the different family, then I actually might have become a different person in part of the church. And I can imagine that sort of path for people. It's bringing back DNA memory where things like this were done back then, and it probably wasn't forbidden or frowned upon as much. But in our times today, of course, it's twisted, it's wrong, and we, you know, need to eradicate it. So I had to look into the psychology, because I did psychology when I was younger. I had to look into the psychology of what is going on. And I did documentaries to prove psychology testing on the brain of how it works from a general paedophile that we can see of any age, or to someone that would be classed as a paedophile, but actually might have a very damaged brain or a very weak brain or even a very young mind, even though their body is older, or, you know, names for these sort of disabilities too. So I learned all of that and put documentaries together about it to explain that actually there's a very, 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 very small percent. It's like less than 1% of the earth that would be classed as a paedophile, where actually they might be, for example, 30 years old. And if they're trying to talk to a 14-year-old, their brain is of a 14-year-old. unfortunately, so to them, it's almost like they're the same age. Now, yes, we know that they do understand that they're actually older, and they know it's wrong when they're doing it, because we've proved this in testing. But then, I'm not saying it's deceptive, but I get that their brain's not normal, it's not right, and it's okay. Rather than me saying it's normal, put them all to death, in my sort of ideology, I'd be like, I'd understand, how can that be helped, or how do we stop it from, future? But then the mass of people that are from public that do it, you've got the different categories and levels, which is really worrying. So in average public, I find there's so many people now which I would class as genetically messed up, gone. Then there are those that are of the rich and powerful, where they must have been through marriage life, they've been through all these other experiences, and they start turning to the sick side of animals, disabled children, and of course, unconsented with minors. The world is in a massive, massive mess with this situation, and it is completely brushed under the carpet from general mainstream medias. General population don't seem to look into it. It becomes those who awaken that come across this sort of rabbit hole. They're like, hang on a minute. And then it gets deep from there.
Well, I wanted to mention somebody, actually. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, The Sound of Freedom, the movie that came out a couple of years ago. Jim Caviezel was the guy who was the main lead in it, and it was about the film where he went into Colombia as an undercover agent, and basically infiltrated an operation and put together a sting and captured and caught and basically collared a bunch of human traffickers that were trafficking children, gathered them all on one island. The sting went in, the operation was a massive success. They got all of the traffickers and they rescued all the children that were missing over the years. He's a massive, Jim Caviezel, that was the film. Jim Caviezel himself was a massive advocate and a huge Christian, and he's hugely on, into the human trafficking, as in trying to uncover it and bring it to the attention of the public. As again, a massive Christian. So when we look into this thing being a religious, and there are links to many religions, isn't there, when it comes to the sort of the, unconsenting with minors or playing with minors in that area. Yet there's also so many advocates within the religious fields who are massively against it as well. So we can't. So what I'm saying is, I suppose it's not fair to tarnish the entire thing on a religion. There are just people within that system who may be involving themselves where they shouldn't be, or over exploiting their power. I suppose that's the point I'm getting to on that. Yeah, but
history tells
over
us
the years,
some very, very deep, dark stuff.
Yeah. But I mean,
sorry.
It's like you said, though, isn't it? The laws have sort of come into the 21st century, but the religions have sort of, in certain aspects, remained behind in areas. Or certain people within positions of power certainly feel that way, and potentially.
You go back in history, laws were still there, but in a different manner. So, you go back to the Mayas, the Mayans, if you want, the Incas, Aztecs. They all had very similar laws, which means if you have more than 2 children and they need to do their sacrificial rituals to make the weather change tomorrow or to bring back the crops, then it was the law to give one of them children. And that's, so they had different types of things tied into them. Sacrificial rituals it was strange. We see it in films of being like, it can be any age, but really, you go into the history, it was always children. That was the preferred sort of method. Go back to, the Latin era of Rome, and that in itself had a very interesting thing. So we know, there's a big debate on the earth about the truth about Christmas and what it really represents. There's an esoteric, and then there's the exoteric. And for those who don't understand the difference between the two, esoteric is mystical teachings in general term. Exoteric is philosophical. But then the other way of looking at it, esoteric is for initiated people generally. It was only for initiated people in the world, a part of the occult orders. Whereas now the public can look into these things. And the exoteric is for the general population and public. And that's the way the knowledge is given out and kind of sought after. So when we look at these things that have kind of like the changes we've gone through, really, and there is dramatic jumps, but one thing that's never disappeared is sacrificial rituals on children. And of course, this desire for the paedophilia, it's always been a strange thing in the system. And not all cultures, but a lot of them did carry it. And I think when the Roman time, this Christmas era, we call around December over here, they basically worshipped Mithra still, which basically came from the Greek era before it, which basically is the same as the pagan. It's sun worship. And at winter, when it's cold, of course, they worship the sun. So the pagans would burn a Yule log, which people see at Christmas time. They get a chocolate Yule log. They burn that, which lasts roughly a week. The pagans would have a general sex fest, but not involving children in the way that I'm about to add on to the next eras. Mithra itself was before the Latin, and the Latins, being like the Romans, they took it on and realised, because they came after in that way, and they took that idea and they still worship the sun, but in winter they decided to have sex rituals, and the children that survived the sex ritual, that didn't die during it, was given a gift, and we'll see you next year. And that's kind of the rule of thumb of how it worked. Ones that were damaged too much, of course, they grabbed them by the legs and the ankles and they found a wall, and that's how they ended. And it was a horrific act, and it was a massive, massive thing. And this is more, of course, the elites that were ruling back then. I know they don't deserve that title, but the elites that were ruling back then. But it was also known within the public. So it's a very strange time in the world if you look at it.
So is that where the tradition of gifting... Sorry to jump in. I'm just curious. Is that where the tradition of giving a gift at Christmas to a child comes from? To apologise for the abuse that is sustained?
If you go back correctly, that's it. If you go back correctly, then it's the strongest point to go from, yeah.
Wow.
And the esoteric I would argue that and say, well, okay, the true meaning of Christmas is when, it comes from your pineal gland, the Christ consciousness, from the Christos, the oil, that one time a month and comes down and so on. There's different ways of breaking down an esoteric understanding, but the true history of why we give children presents would come from that. There's other sort of mythologies that will tie into it, how, people would take things from children during a certain time of the year. But forget all them, it's not as strong as the one where it came from the Roman era.
And the 25th of done. Yeah, and the 25th of December, at least during Roman times, of course, being Saturnalia, Saturn worship. And it is, of course, believed that, Saturn ties into Satan, the adversary, and all of that, which, goes way back. And I fucking love that you're bringing up all the esoteric stuff like that. That is absolutely what I'm about and what I do, on my own show. And it is like, indeed, the crystal oil, like coming down the chimney, which is, a particular part in your in your skull, going down the 33 vertebrae. I just wanted to say that I fucking love that, and I've been looking deeper into the esoteric side of the holidays. Also with Kronos, for example, Father Time being related to Santa, and that's why he can be everywhere all at once. So this is all incredibly ancient, and child sacrifice, of course, going even further back, like you spoke about Mithras, which comes from Zoroastrianism, Persia, Asia Minor, and then if you go, of course, like down to the Levant, you get into like the Baal worship, Amalek worship, which even in more, let's say, mainstream conspiracy theories is very well known for their their child sacrifice and all of that, and even Sparta, the Spartans, so incredibly obsessed with being the strongest possible that if a child during birth even like looked somewhat meek, they just, sorry to say this for everyone watching and listening, but they quite literally just tossed it off a cliff.
Yeah. And I think mentioned Saturn, and now that's important for people to understand how this works. Now, I'm not going to get into the topic as such about what shape the Earth is, because that one can go on forever with people. I have qualifications in planetary science. So many years ago, my logo for my show, Controversial Subjects Unleashed, had a globe on it. And the viewers and watchers used to be like, it's flat. And I'd be like, shut up, all of you, this, that, the other. And I'd have these debates and that. And then I went deep into them studies as well, and one thing leads to another. What I like to do is I take all the ancient cultures and a bit more of today's sort of options, and understanding science and the esoteric and the unseen. And I can help people understand what's best to describe what the whole situation we're living in. And Saturn is important for this. So, in alchemy, you have 7 levels of alchemy. They are described as the 7 metals of alchemy, or the 7 planets of alchemy, luminaries. Saturn is base. It's the most dense, heavy planet of them all, is what they class. So that would be classed as base chakra. The 7 chakras, it'd be the base one, aka hell, the heel of your foot. The sun, being the most brightest, if you want, or energetic, would obviously be the highest, you know, and that's enlightenment, which is why all symbology will have a halo or a light, a flame between 2 horns of, you know, Baphomet and these sort of things. It's described the highest level, pure light, if you want to call it. So with the religions, that some of the more modern religions, because we know that I'm not going to say the wrong word, I'm trying to get it right. We'll say Judaism. So the Judaism goes back. Now, we know that Islam, for example, what do they worship? The cube. The Kaaba is called, the cube. They walk around it 7 times. They don't know why they walk around 7 times, but that's what the deal is. You go to Kaaba, you walk around it 7 times. What's their God called? Allah. Put it together, Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is the Jewish mysticism, and it comes before it. It's almost as if they were part of the creation. If you go into, look at the word Muhammad from Islam, well, Old French for Muhammad means Baphomet. Baphomet. I don't know if you know that.
And also with Baphomet, if you put the Judaic in the cipher to it, it becomes Sophia, who was the ultimate goddess of wisdom.
Yeah, there's lots of beautiful things to tie in with it all. And I think when we look at the Indian Sanskrits, they're called the Kali Yuga cycles and whatnot, they're important because they break everything down to look like a sound wave. So what do we know as a fact from science or common knowledge? You have a light spectrum, a sound spectrum, and an electromagnetic spectrum. In the light spectrum, there's 7 spectrums. In the sound spectrum, there's 7 spectrums. And in the electromagnetic spectrum, there's 7 spectrums. Exoterically up on the Earth, they want you to believe there's 7 continents, but there's not. But the number 7 was important to keep. Who created the idea of the planetary layout? They want you to believe there's 7 oceans upon the Earth. 7 seas, they call it, but there's actually only 1 ocean that covers the Earth. The number 7 is so important. So when we trying to look at what's actually happened, if you lay all of these spectrums on top of each other, and you have a magnet, for example, you have the red and the blue of a magnet, north and south, and you find the very center point of that magnet, there is no such thing as north and south in that moment. That's called the plane of inertia. When we look at electric, we have positive, negative, earth. It's basically knows, it's the 3 elements to it. So basically the positive, negative, again, for what we're living in, we have the moon, negative, the sun, positive, and we are the earth. When we look at the chakras, you come up to the 4th one, that's heart, which is the same spelling as earth, apart from mixing 1 or 2 letters. Depends if you're doing numerology. But anyway, so you look at this layout of what's really going on, and the center point is where we are. When we look at the esoteric truth about all these things that are going on, masculinity on the brain, and then the feminine side, and then you're not a divine until you balance it out and you're in the middle. It's all symbology, and it's so brilliant when you start putting it all together. So when we say that on the earth, we must have the most happiest child somewhere, that is very true. But somewhere else on the earth, because of polarity and because of the yin and yang and the balance, perpetual balance of this thing we're living in, there is actually some child that's going for the most horrific pain and suffering on the earth. And I think what I try to explain to people is that, yes, it sounds beautiful painting this just a perfect earth. It can't exist. Light can't exist without the dark. But finding a better balance where everyone comes closer to the middle means that it's more alike and balanced. Okay? Not that we'll ever get everyone in a perfect line balancing on that point, but we can get everyone squashed in together and it can be a better world. It's a bit vastly spread at the moment. People are doing too well off, in my opinion. They don't understand the laws of suffering and lessons and pain and that sort of thing. And then, of course, vice versa, the other side, people are born and they don't get to experience that. For those who don't understand or don't believe in, like, the reincarnation processes or whatever, but just imagine that if life was what it was, you're born once, you get one opportunity, and people are given whether they're given days to live or months to live or years to live from birth, and it could be a horrific life. It's not fair, is it? So that's why I do like to believe in that, that cycle. The Ouroboros in symbology would represent that, a snake or a dragon eating its own tail. Here, look, my favourite cushion I take everywhere. So that symbol represents that. Those people with the lower consciousness, and no one take offence to that, it means if you haven't started a path of enlightenment, the awareness, the word awake isn't exactly a great word, even though I use it every day. Awaken, wake people up once you're awake. But the truth, the word wake means something you do after death. But as I say, the word awareness is important. As people are becoming aware of the truth of the earth, ourselves, the pains and horrors that the world is going through, then that's when really they are on that path of enlightenment. And there's no turning back. Unless you have certain things in your body or certain drugs or certain things that happen to you that can switch it off, then basically your path has begun. So even if you did die in this lifetime, short of them reaching it, your next visit, you're already given that point by the age of, it should be by the age of 7, but we've been trapped in this world to not be allowed to remember our previous lives.
Yeah.
And again, that would come under what they call the moon conscious sphere cap. But it's a beautiful bloody matrix program we're living in. But yeah, of course, one of the biggest, most painful topics to look at, which destroyed my life, which was the abuse and the failings upon the children in this world.
Amor fati, eternal return.
So, good God,
No.
there's so much there to unpack. We say it on every episode, or I say it on every episode, and I'll say it again now. One of the things that going down one rabbit hole allows you to do is see the things in other topics and connect those dots. You're constantly connecting the dots. And there's a lot of things you said there that blow my mind, to be honest with you. There's a lot of interesting things there, and there's a lot of theories that sort of mesh into other theories as well. Do you know what I mean about connecting those dots? You know, when you start hearing the same thing a lot of times from different sources that may not believe in the full thing, but it's still very, very similar. It allows you to start creating this big picture. It makes for an interesting picture for sure. One of the things you picked up on there, and I want to return to it just because I don't want to jump over it. You said that the age of 7 is when sort of children should be naturally becoming enlightened. We hear a lot of stories, and this is something that, again, my missus is incredibly interested in, is when you hear children having these incredibly vivid memories and experiences, horrifying experiences, including night terrors and all sorts. And often, a lot of the times, it ends up coming to fruition that they do actually remember the finer details of some of these memories that are coming back, as if they were the person that were living those memories. Particularly, one case I remember is the World War II pilot that was taken to a plane where his plane crashed into the ocean during a battle somewhere in the Pacific. And he was, he burst out crying when they got to the spot, and he wasn't prompted to believe that this is the spot. He just burst out crying because the overwhelming emotion got to him. You think that's link, basically, is what you're saying, is to what you were saying about there, the 7 chakras, the different paths to enlightenment. You think that perhaps those children that are remembering those memories are very close to that stage of enlightenment as to why they're experiencing them? Is that what you're saying, that they maybe died just shy of it in a previous life?
Yeah, so that in itself is true, even though there's something called the waiting. Now, it's important for me to mention this for all the viewers. I'm not signed into any order. I'm under no oath on planet Earth to anyone. But I've been fortunate for many, many years to work alongside the Masonic orders, Rosicrucianist, people that work in the Golden Dawn, and some of the other esoteric sort of cult systems, if you want to call it. And their allowance with working with me is because they believe I'm such a good buddy. My efforts are there for it. Even though I'm not perfect with it all, I stand in my truth. I'm not signing up to anything, so I'll always be a free man. But luckily because of that, I've actually had so many discussions and topics offline with people that really help fill the gaps for me. And then so many times they've asked me to join up to the hidden occult pillars where I'm not involved with societal masonry, and then that way I can learn the true mysteries of the cathedrals. without them giving the secrets, because that's their oath not to do so. But when I'm allowed to approach them with my questions of what I discover and what I come across and what I believe to be true over the time and years, they're allowed to confirm and then discuss things with me. So it's been a beautiful journey. Now, in regards to, let's just say right now, we know there's like nearly 9 billion people on the planet. And there was a time at one point on the Earth where there would have only been like allegedly 1 or 2 people on the planet. So the question is, what happens to all these other consciousness, all these other spirits or souls? Not a lot of people know the difference between a spirit and a soul. I can break that down too. But what happens to all of them if they're in this waiting area and then they come back in? Technically, by the way, to quickly fill that gap in, the spirit itself is the individual. Me, you, everyone who's going to keep coming back and back, whether you like it or not, until you reach enlightenment, and then you get to become your own God and you can create your own universe. In theory, that's the sorcery of it. Very rarely do they come back, but they do come back sometimes to become the masters, like in certain religions, Jesus or Muhammad and whatnot. They come back apparently to bring the message again and so on for the sleepy masses world. But in regards to your question, Lee, the children in the age of 7 and that memory, that DNA memory is passed down, but then the actual, that's for the physical body. The spiritual body is the important part. We already right this second have access to your previous lives, how many times you've been here. You can even have a little peep at the future. But whilst doing all of that, you'd come back out now, providing you had no drive to do anything with that information, you probably wouldn't, you'd be left alone. But they would know. So if someone like me tapping into the Akashic record or tapping into certain, into the gates, we'll call it, because there's over 10 million Masons worldwide. Right now, you've got over 100,000 Masons that are sitting there with their eyes closed and now in the astral plane, guarding the plane. And if any of us try to access it without being signed into the orders or temples, you're getting knocked out. And then eventually you get arrested for mysticism if you keep tapping with the doors. They'll lay something in place in the physical plane, so you are done. It's a very, very deep game. Now, what happens is, from a matrix explanation point of view, if all of us remembered now our previous lives, why we're here and what's going to happen in the future, then the experience becomes different. The whole layout changes. So those of us that wake up like we are, I went through years and years running around trying to wake everyone up in the world and disturbing bubbles on a mass scale, popping bubbles all day, every day. That was my game. And then I realised how many people I've broken. After years and years, I realised how many lives I've destroyed, because these people now are not living comfortably. These people can't go back to sleep. They were happy before.
So let me put it to you, just on that one quickly.
Because you just the balance.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly on that point. You mentioned obviously the consciousness in people and becoming awakened. There's a lot of rumour in the world at the minute, and this is just a fleeting visit to this. We'll return exactly where we were a second ago, because I think where we're going is incredibly interesting. But there are people and whispers in the world that this 3-eye atlas thing approaching is some kind of NHI beacon with a purpose is to raise or elevate human consciousness to essentially achieve those awakenings. What do you think of all this? I mean, what do you think of that, just quickly? Just the thought that maybe there are people saying that. What do you think?
From a planetary science point of view, which I'm allowed to add this in, and the science academic world would never be able to question me if they've actually done their studies and their higher level. This is understanding the macro and the micro. So we all have a pineal gland. And right now in space, that word space will upset a lot of people if they're watching it, because they might see the idea of the firmament. So we'll say space in my term now represents the firmament. We'll call it that. The layer of the stars and what's above.
Mm-hmm.
Up there in the layer of stars and what's above, the firmament or space, we have also what they generally call the eye, which is basically like a pineal gland as well. It's a nebula, it's exploding, it's going massive. And that is directly in space from a different point, which would represent what our 2 eyes would look like, and so on. And it's almost like a macro and micro. So in space, light in itself is expanding and growing as we speak, and it's on a massive, rapid scale. That's how the greats knew back then that the Age of Aquarius was when astrologically these things happen. So therefore, upon the Earth, 3 or 4 major waves come through of light that they can't stop it in theory, apart from covering our skies in cloud seed, and by doing certain things to the humans to break their conscious levels and pineal gland calcification through fluoridation and things like that, which is real, by the way, it's happening all over the earth. This was put in place a long time ago after World War II because they knew they were against the clock. And if these things didn't happen to us, then right now in the whole world, people wouldn't be going to fast food restaurants. They wouldn't be doing anything apart from making sure their water's clean. They wouldn't be having any pharmaceutical industry whatsoever, apart from surgeries for maybe the odd thing. There would be self-healing people upon the earth already that could help others and touch each other. And through sounds that you can make from your own mouth, you'll be able to start healing people's body parts. But that's what's been removed from us because that's their power. They're the knowledge, the sacred knowledge keepers. And
do you think
so
that kind of information
coming
was taken away? You know, the Sumerian times, they say obviously a lot of, before the 11,800 years ago, the mud slides and the mud flows that apparently destroyed these civilizations with this knowledge that you've just spoken of there. Do you put anything to that?
Yeah. The mud floods weren't 12,000 years ago. What that was,
well,
that was the Younger Dryas period.
Yeah,
the Younger Dryas period when the Northern Hemisphere comet. So that was the floods, the great floods of Atlantis. When it says that Atlantis submerged into water and sunk, it basically means the sea levels rose. We can prove that, and we know that because all across the planet where they did ancient buildings like Göbekli Tepe, which in Turkish means stone on a hill, or you've got the Great Pyramids and stuff like that. I can take you to a cathedral. I've got a video on my phone here I found the other night from one of my old ancient videos where I go into a cathedral and it's 800-year-old stained glass. Halfway down it, you see the Great Pyramids, you see people running, and there's a big wave coming over it. That's because it was made, and they knew the story hundreds of years ago that the pyramids are older than 4,000 or 5,000 years old, or 6. They're 12,000 years old, and they were around the time of the Great Flood. You go to France, and one of the most expensive doors on planet Earth is made of gold. And that in itself is in France. And towards the top of the story, it shows you a great pyramid and all the animals going into the ark. Symbology. What this is telling us is they knew something was coming before it came thousands of years ago, and that created this tidal wave around the earth and the sea levels rising. I'm not saying there weren't the odd mud flood with that, of course there would have been, but that was the catastrophe they knew of. The main mud floods being a couple hundred years ago is because the Tartarian Empire were messing with sound technologies around the earth, which eventually got into the wrong hands and a little bit too excited, and they ended up, messing with the earth to a point where everything went a bit soft, and because sound can do that to solids, it can change its shape altogether. It can change its frequency, grip of itself, its autonomy. They're two different timelines, but between that, what happened is of the Babylonian Sumerian era, you have what we know now is the Irish. So where Ireland is, to the left-hand side of Ireland, you've got Atlantic Ocean. Take away all the water between England and Ireland and France, we were called Doggerland. Doggerland was marshland, as they call it. They recognise it as a big area. That is basically the Atlantic Atlantis. It's what we were. So that's what they're telling us in the story. Now, the tribes that live there, that were the fifth root race that were born upon the earth, because we have 5 blood types today, whereas in the beginning there would have been 1. So evidently it's showing us the 5 root races. In Genesis of the Bible, Genesis will represent the genetics of man, the 7 genetics or the 7 generations to come of man. So we're the 5th now. We're about to see the 6th in our time, because we're at that transition. And then another couple of thousand years will then be classed as Atlanteans again, the human experience consciousness. So thousands of years ago, around 6,000-7,000 years ago, if you want to call it that, one of the sons of Ireland, the god of Ireland, was called Aton. In Egypt, also recognised as Aton, which was on. So the word Solomon, Sol is Anglo-Saxon for sun. Is the Indian word for sun, and then on is the Egyptian word for sun. Solomon represented the sun and the energy of it. The son of one of the sons from Ireland came across to the south, being Egypt, the Middle East, if you want, because they were doing work out there, and his name was Heber. He turned against his tribes because he had a powerful army, if you want, and that's where the languages of Hebrew and all this began. That's where all the families that run the world, that were here to replenish it after the Great Flood, couple of them turned against the others and tried to take over the world and said, we want to make a slave race that worked for us. Why should we keep saving everyone and replenishing the earth? We're stopping the program, turned against their duty to the world. And then that's when the Middle East became, as we get told today in the curriculum, it's the cradle of civilization. Well, it weren't. That was the reset. That's when slavery began. That's when the laws were made for humanity and taxes were made and will cut off your noses and your faces so you know you're a slave to the tribe. And that's when the whole world changed. So that's when we call it Babylon, the beginning of Babylon. And the beast, if you want to call it, the system we've all lived under ever since. Hence why I say in my videos, it's our time now to make this change on this world, because if we don't, then we might as well just go with the program, because this is how I see it. We've got this time now to change it. And so I do feel that it is in our time.
Yeah, I was going to say, moving on to that, you say, I mean, we just mentioned the 3-eye atlas thing and this mass awakening, and you've just mentioned there that you think we're going to experience the sixth awakening, or the sixth, what did you say? The sixth step in, the sixth
epoch.
Yeah. So you think we're moving into that? So do you think, and you said we're going to see that in our lifetime, what do you think that is, or what do you think shape that comes in?
So you witness it as you speak now. Just to put something right in the academic world, which again can be proven now, because I did this years ago. The Mayan calendar never said nothing about the world will end in 2012. What it showed you was, though, is at the end of the age, before the next age, which we call generally in the world Aquarius, the Age of Aquarius, what they knew is, like all the other cultures, even Christianity knows it, and I'll tell you about that. I can tell you about Islam. I'll tell you that all of them know the same thing. And at the moment, we're going through it. The Mayans actually written in 2021 will be the end of the age. Well, look at the world in 2020. It was shut down. Yeah. You can't write it. It was shut down over a bloody alleged flu, which we now know weren't what we were told.
And nobody's believed anything since.
That ties in. Exactly. It ties in perfectly. This awakening was real, but they had a very quick moment to try and shove all that into people's arms, into people's bodies, because they know eventually it shuts down that pineal gland expansion for people to just wake up naturally. We're having to put the extra work in now to help that happen to people. The sixth epoch is what is called an anthroposophy. Epoch's an important word for it. If you go to the Christian Bible, it's called an eon. And they said to Jesus in the Bible, when will we know it's at the end of your eon? And Jesus replies, at the end of my eon, a man will be bearing water. Aquarius, the water bearer. You know, every culture carries the same story, but with different words for different characters. The Bible itself tells people, do not take this book literally. It is an allegory. The word allegory means made up fictional characters and places. So you got to have you understand the astrological importance of what we're living in. We're living in one massive, humongous clock, and the Earth in itself is the center of it all.
That's astrotheology, right?
Astrotheology.
I've had a student of Santos Bonacci on my own show. Micah Dank. He is he's one of his students, and really took it into took astrotheology and ran with it and made his own presentations and wrote books and everything about it. And I absolutely have to agree with you. God, this is right up my alley. I could do this on my own show. It is like I'm on my own show. Because I talk about this shit all the time, but I absolutely believe that you are right. And I've had, conversations with so many people who really, like, their mass awakening was, the 2020, 2021, like that was their mass awakening. And honestly, I think that maybe the ruling elites, they didn't count on it like happening so fast, and that's why they're now going balls to the wall. Let's say, like, they're just throwing every fucking thing that they can against us, because if they can't stop it, then at least they're going to take as many of us down with them as possible.
But I don't understand. I mean, we're just trying to enlighten me. I mean, we say that the awakening and it's about the enlargement of the pineal gland, and they're doing everything they can to stop that. But what's the next step? I mean, what are we looking for? What are we waiting for? Because, like I said, a lot of the people are saying there's a second coming of Christ on the horizon. There's somebody, Chris Bledsoe from the UAP.
I'll break that down.
Please go ahead. Because all I'm trying to say
I'll break
is,
that down for you.
for the people that are listening,
it's another wave of enlightenment. The Christos oil. It's not like literally, Christ coming down from the sky and be like, oh, I'm back, bitches.
Sure. Because a new knowledge is going to be bestowed upon mankind when the regular star is above the Sphinx and it glows red. That's what has been said from Chris Bledsoe. He didn't say that Christ is coming. He says that a new knowledge will fall upon mankind. And that's predicted in 2026, next year, March.
It is already.
So what do you believe about that? I mean,
that's
the regular star, right?
That's happening already. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about it.
It's happening. So in regards to the Pacific Star going above the pyramids, I mean, every age it will happen no matter what, because it's part of the clock. It will never, ever change. It never hasn't, never will. So our layout that we see will always be on the Pacific. And so there's a humongous version, which is what the Indians called it. They break it down into the Kali Yuga, Rupa Yuga, Dwapar Yuga cycles. Here on the Western world, we'll call it Aquarius, Pisces. We've just come out of the age of Pisces now, which is why the Pope's hat is a fish mouth, which is why Jesus is a fisherman. That's the age of Pisces. We're now entering the age of Aquarius, the water bearer, which means a man's tipping water out. The water's not being sieved through the fish anymore of the system and then giving us what they want. It is now being poured out, and those who choose to see and to drink from it, that's up to them.
Those are the waters above.
But what's really going to happen on this physical plane that can't be hidden from comes from two deliveries. First delivery, the awakening's real, and even people that are comfortable in their normal way of life are probably starting to feel uncomfortable in their normal way of life, and they don't even know why. Nothing to do with the news and what's happening outside. They might just not feel right anymore. It's because that isn't a real life. They have no spiritual connection. They have no understanding where they come from, where they're going and whatnot, and that's not healthy for the mind. So that's why they're starting to be break down.
That's
then
how
there's
I
the other
felt
version
now.
of those that,
felt like that for
then
a
there are
while.
those that run the world that realise this is happening, and in their best interest is to depopulate as quickly as possible to the smallest number that they can control without losing control in that process. That's their game. Now, a lot of the things they put in place to do that are still in place happening. A lot of the things they put in place to work alongside the things they've put in place are not working to their original setup. And that's the divine kicking in now. This is like the good side almost. Things are going wrong for them. But the depopulation is real, and they've already put that in place where, I expect over the next 10 years, rather than seeing the increase of the population of the Earth, we're already starting to see it flattening out, and then it'll start to decrease. So they had that in mind, and of course it's running along side by side. They never want their families to become getting their hands dirty and going to work. They want to be able to live off the riches of all the working class in the world.
So when's their
breaking
deadline?
And crumbling. Symbolically, people would say 2031. That in a prophecy would be classed as wormwood. And the reason why I say 2031 is because in regards to, they set themselves for like the 2020 to 2030 agenda, and it's not already going to plan. So within a year after 2030, we're already going to send some major chaos on the Earth, unfortunately. But those that are awakened, if they don't see it so horrific and try and see it as, this is the final shakings of, the creation before we actually get to really set our feet into the new way of life, after that. But you've got to go through a bit more rough yet. And rightfully so. Do you know why? 5 years ago, I wouldn't say what I'm about to say to you now. I'm only going to say it because I'm in a position where, forgive them, Father, for they do not know. I appreciate all of that. But you know what? When you're dealing with generally the sleepy masses or generally the general population people, it's painful. It is painful because they look at us like we're absolute nuts and we're a problem and this, that and the other. And when really we're screaming hope, we're screaming help to them. We're trying to bring these changes and show what's going on. And they look at us like we're freaking nuts. So there is a long way to go for the general population, which is why when I was dealing with a Grand Master in 2021 of one of my local lodges, he agreed on a debate with me that I wouldn't release certain things that I had discovered to the public at that time. And I got to ask questions. And my questions were about the epoch changes and what happens to the Masons, because a lot of them are having that and they don't know what's, you know what I mean? That doesn't make sense to me. And what he confirmed is it's because it wasn't done in that manner to them. Those that have had it in the order is because they are just societal and they're not actually interested in esoteric, and them themselves are like the public that they're living amongst. So what he said was, during these changes, when the world gets to its very peak of Armageddon, we'll call it, some of them will click and wake up and then quickly flip to the other side, the side of light and the side of good, and realizing that's where they should have been to start with. But, you know, that's the way he explained it to me, that it wasn't like those in the order are given the special key and they're all told what's going. No, they weren't. I was absolutely blown away by it.
So it's the higher rankers,
so it seems to almost been like it seems to have been like a program upon the earth where if you're awake or was awakened during them times or before that, of course, the general media and the general government label us as conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers and all this other crazy stuff. When really we're just critical thinkers. We have the capability which is called intelligence, which means we are able to question anything and everything. People that go and get a degree in any category, they have to be good at regurgitating the answers in order to get that degree. That's like in the Masonic order levels. Once you understand your rituals and your processes, you're allowed to move up a degree. You know, it's all symbolically the same. I don't want no degree. I'm like a degree destroyer. I like to sit with people that have got degrees and really break them down to make them realise then that they've missed the whole life of what they could have been, and it's a whole new world then.
It's always interesting. It's always the people with the lower education, I suppose, on paper, that have always got the most critical minds and have got the ability to really dig deep and ask those questions and search out the answers. It's always the people that never did well with the tax system that they put in place, right? People that they shunned and got rid of. Well, one thing you mentioned...
Well, that's because they...
Oh, go on, Stijn.
I mean, I'd say that's because they, you know, they struggle most and they have, you know, the most benefits in finding those answers. Like if you're living a cushy life, if you grew up, I don't know, like a banker's son or whatever, if you grew up in a millionaire, billionaire fucking family, like what reason do you have? What use is it to you to, you know, find those answers? You know, it doesn't matter. Like I'm living a cushy life. I got, you know, like I got millions in the bank already. My family is incredibly fucking wealthy. Like I have a good life. I have no need for that information. It is us, well, blue collar people,
the sheeple,
and that's
perception.
I mean,
perception is the most important word.
Yeah, exactly.
Effective and
that's
perception.
also why
so perception is, as we can point and prove, someone with the most money in the world might be the richest person or richest category, yet not actually completely happy. And then someone with nothing can find happiness playing with a bloody tree branch, for example.
Exactly. And I think
they could be that literally, when I say happiest, their vibrational frequency of the body, it's like, you know what I mean? It is literally what is provable as happiness. Yeah. And then someone who thinks they're happy because they got money actually might sit there and they're living in a sad state of mind, which is an illness, which is a disease to the body.
And I think like blue collar, like we can even like kind of tie that back into the Matrix, even the movie, if you want, because I believe it was in the original story that Neo took the blue pill, which makes a lot more sense because red, you know, you were talking about the chakras. Red is, you know, the lowest chakra. It's the, you know, the animalistic base instinct for someone to, you know, want to gain that higher knowledge, higher awareness. It wouldn't make sense to take, you know, the red pill, and that's, I guess, what you now also see in, you know, the red pill circles and you know, all of that. It's, you know, it's all, you know, bro science, and it's about, well, money and hoes, basically, with, you know, some truth sprinkled in to keep them coming, and to like kind of try and tie it back into the kids thing. I got a question. I'm curious as to what you think of this. The reason why, or would be the reason why so many of those who do it consciously, let's say, what they unfortunately do to the children, would that also be in an effort to, let's say, destroy the next generation so that, you know, they can possibly wake up? Because, you know, we are kind of like a new enlightened generation, if you will, and we are I mean, I can of course only speak for myself, for my wife and myself. We are teaching our children that, we are teaching them, you know, not, you know, at least that, you know, there is more, and it is kind of a spiritual upbringing still, you know, own choice, you know, they still have freedom of choice, of course, but, you know, it is a more spiritual upbringing. And I do believe that, you know, our I absolutely agree with that. You know, either our children or our children's children are, you know, there's gonna be maybe the final awakening, or like they're gonna really like break everything 2031 that would about line up with that. So what I'm trying to say is, like, would that all be in an effort to destroy the generation that they know is gonna, you know, destroy them, let's say?
Yeah, in a multi-category way. So if they can't get to them through that sort of layout of injecting things into their bodies, they're getting to them, you know, through the food, the air poisoning, through the schooling.
Mm-hmm.
The word school in Hebrew, which is backwards, means mental abuse of a child.
Yeah, that's definitely how I felt in school.
I mean, you look at these things, and really, I mean, schools are two titles for schools: either A, indoctrination camps, or B, the daycare. Because if they was to teach children properly about the world, then they would spend a lot more time in nature rather than sitting in a square room, at a table. And the way it's not really a comfortable lifestyle for a child, it's not fair. Let's just say if they was to teach them the truth, they would be out in nature. They would be teaching them no religions at all, just spirituality, which means you have your version of yourself and then a higher version of yourself, a better version of yourself. You can always aim for that. Teach them the truth about how to survive with money, really, rather than the higher educated students going through business classes and stuff like that. It's just more, there's a lot of things that could change that could make that better, but all designed by a specific group in the world that control the medical industry, they control the curriculum industry across the world, the defense systems of all the countries are all tied together how they work, and they have literally almost landed checkmate on the world, and it wouldn't look like a nice place after.
So the people running this, we're talking about are we saying that, like, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, are they the tip of the spear, or are they, again, puppets themselves? And coming back to what you said before about this awakening, do you think all of the unrest that's happening throughout the West, that's essentially been buoyed on by Trump, the way that he's sort of slammed the door shut on a lot of the things that could potentially be sort of construed as negative, you know, the wokery and all of that stuff, and the way that the UK is following suit, the unrest now we're seeing with the flags and the patriotism, and people just not following and stepping into the lines anymore as they have done in previous years. Do you think that's part of that awakening phase? I know I've asked you two questions there. If you can remember the first one, what do you think of those two, if I put them to you?
I think I would say that in regards to what it could lead to, so they're masterminds. The ones that are running the show are masterminds. And then they pay and hire thousands of other masterminds that are dedicated to them, because they've been birthed into teachings and secret schools, whatever you would like to call them. They're not really called schools, but their children, like politicians, are born into very rich places and whatnot, and they're bred to become something. So all of the people we see as world powers, whether it's like the Facebook owner and all the people, they were designed by their parents to become who they are, and it was guided. So I kind of see that when we look at that question, it's like they really have landed a mastermind scenario on us all, where there's no escaping that. They infiltrated every single category of structure upon the earth, and it took them a long time to get there, because there was times where people spotted what was going on and tried to make these changes throughout history, especially World War II. You know, Pacific character spotted what he seemed to be true back then, Hitler is frowned upon by the general population. But you go to India and they would literally give their life for him. But he weren't from India, was he? What do they know that you don't? Because they're very intelligent cultures out there that know a lot of stuff. What did Hitler bring to the earth? When he came into power, the very first law he brought in, that no banker or no bank ever is allowed to make interest on any man ever again. Because he knew that that's how they made and destroyed countries, the bankers, by getting in there, interest, and then they own your country.
Yeah.
So he removed that. The second law he brought out was that all gay clubs, because Germany was the gay capital of the earth, all gay clubs are to be shut immediately and to turned into free libraries or home places for homeless. And second to that, all the gay books and all the gay things are to be eradicated. Not because people weren't allowed to be gay, it's because he didn't want it being pumped into children's faces.
Yeah.
So perspective-wise, I stand by that. I thought that's bloody good things what he did. We get told myths and stories about a lot of other things that I won't go into now because we're not about all of that. I just see how the stories we've been led to believe in our life would make it difficult for me to know and see what I see coming and how to change it. Whereas I'm at quite a settled state of mind, knowing that the deliverance of it is actually at a point where it should become more and more blatant to the average man to start decoding all this now and understanding it.
So
there is no straight answer for your question, but it's a bit of a,
So this is just part of the process. But what do you see coming? While you've mentioned that teaser there, what do you see coming?
Okay, so the path from 1 and 2, which is the back end of what I was trying to say really, but back end of 1 and 2 would be this. Because they're masterminds and they've planned out every outcome, if it goes into civil unrest and everyone turns into mass rioting, obviously the idea would be is if we were mass rioting as public across the world against the system, brilliant. Because even those in the system then, like the armies and the police forces, will start to eventually change and realise that they should be with us as well. And that's where it could really start to make a difference. But the unfortunate mess will be more likely mass rioting against religion versus religion, culture versus culture, and looting, and that's a collapse we don't want, because that's when they come in and they're still at their full force and they have the reasons to turn around to the armies and the people that work for them. Look at what's going on. But when all the people are coming at them, those that are in it are meant to be proud for working for their government and army. We'll be like, hang on a minute, why are the people attacking us? And then they start to question what the government's done wrong, and then they realise that they're part of the bad side and they turn to the good. It's a horrific thing, but either way, they've got it under control. They know what they're doing. I would like to say that it feels like the West has had its, which we know is true, there isn't really a civilization on planet Earth that lasted more than a couple 150 years. Well, Britain, if you want to see it as a superpower, has well outdue its time, well past due. And look at the world today that is basically run under the monarchy empire. The police and the systems are an absolute joke. It's a crime against humanity, what they do to us. When there was a time on the earth where the Jews, Muslims, Christians, everyone on the earth and all of the esoteric Masonic organizations on planet Earth had an agreement, and they all agreed, and it stuck with Earth forever. And they called it common universal law, which means wherever you go on this planet, you do not cause loss, harm, or damage, or break of a moral contract. And if you do, you are to be put it right. Then the Babylonian system decided, well, they were going a bit too fast down that road, so we're going to charge them and give them points and money making. It became, a corporation for the dead entities and whatnot. And it's a very sick thing that's been done to us. So the true battle on this earth about light and dark should be every human being, regardless to what colour you are, regardless to what your culture is or where you're born. I don't care what your ideas are and all this sort of stuff. If it's you against any other public, you're in the wrong program. It should be every human being on the earth that is not into the system versus the system, because that's what's broken. That's what's turning us against each other. And when I say the system, I do mean the religious community, so the religious powers. I'm on about the monarchies of the earth and, the governments. All of that in itself is the beast. And they're the ones that entrap humanity. And they make us think that we can't survive without a system. Yes, we can. We can't survive without police. Yes, we can. Because I tell you something now, if someone does something wrong, like touches a child, and the police turn up their door, they're going to go and get a slap on the wrist, and they're going to go and put on a little register, and they're going to get put back out there in society around children. But if we had no police, and it was the people of each town that went and sorted the problem out, you get a load of men turn up at that door to go and sort out the person who's out a child. Problem solved. There is no paperwork, there is no aftermath, it's job done, goodbye, next. And that fear will be put into them across the world, and they would stop immediately, the ones that got the message. And that's the way I see it. So people that worry about having no system, there will always be a structure in place. Hierarchy is not necessary, because a true hierarchy that works in a tribe, and this would be my sort of world tribe, means if I become a leader for the people, I lose my shoes, I lose my clothes, I'll have a bit of wrap to put over my body, and I'll never own anything ever again in my life. Because that's what the true tribes in the world did, and still do to today. Those that are tribal people, they still do that today. Those that are leaders have nothing. They're not allowed privileges, they're not allowed fun, because they're the decision making for that community. They're the elders, the ones that have had their fun, and then they get to be that position, and then make it stay smooth and well and good. So they lose all of their assets. Whereas we have worlds where the more assets you have, the more likely you are being in a position of power. It's backwards and it's wrong, and that's why it's broken, and it will never be good for the world unless we do stand together, united against the beast, the system. Now, the system has a choice, because when it comes crumbling down from them and the people do turn and they get that knowledge and it becomes that thing where it does start to flip, the best thing they can do is clear up the mess before we get there. And that's by actually really starting to bring the things out that make people happy again, make people feel that they're fairly treated. You know, stop trying to destroy us with the pharmaceutical industries, and teach us that our happiness and our brain will make us more healed than any medicine for whatever issue you've got. These are the things that they know to be true. And it's not that it's been lost, it's just hidden.
So when you say you're a freeman, now I've looked into this before, and there's certain sort of things that come along with that.
Yeah, not free,
a free man. So that means somebody that goes by common law and not maritime law and doesn't buy into the system. So I know people that don't pay council tax based upon that kind of thing, don't pay bills, or don't, you know, they're just basically off grid, that sort of claim to be free men on the land. Is that the sort of category you fall into yourself, or are you still sort of plugged into the system?
No, so what it is, it's a terminology game, that is. So those that use the word freeman in their name, they're touching on a touchy subject that could be pulled against them, because the 13 families that would allegedly rule the world, if you want to call it that, back in the day, one of which was allegedly called Freemans. When we look at the word Freemasons, well, the word masonry means stone, doesn't it? Stone worker. That in itself isn't quite true for the term. When you go through the initiation of Freemasonry, you become a free living man. Because before you become initiated, you're classed as a person in society, a dead entity. You know, like we all are in this corporation. But then you become a free living man, recognised as a living man. Another word would be sovereign, if you want. But these words and etymology will also lead you to realise that the best way of describing yourself is that, for me saying earlier, I'm tied into no cult on the earth. I have no oath to anything upon the earth, whereas all of these things require an oath. And I'm a free man walking the land and the earth wherever I want to go. In the Mason order, they call that a traveller. So you're called a traveller from east to west. So if a Freemason stood in a courtroom talking to a judge and he tries to give him the hint that he's also a Freemason, he'll say, I travel from east to west, or something like that, along the lines that no one else in the room would understand. And it's all word use and terminology. So for me, I'm just free. Free spirit man, free being, that can do as and what I want upon this plane. And that's it. I'm not tied to anyone. I do not have a God, because people that think the word God's a very important word, by the way, need to go back to a time called dog, Latin. Dog backwards is God. There's an important thing about that and how that all works. To break down the truth of what God is, I've made some documentaries and videos people can watch, which are very good. And they have some very, very irrefutable drops throughout them that help people understand all of this and how it works. So for those that are quickly watching, I'll just throw that in there. God is described in a Christian output as being the creator, the architect, if you want, that sits above the firmament, watching down on us all. Okay, there's one description. Islam, the Muslims believe their God, Allah, law, is a spark of light. It has no image, or it has no image. So not a lot of people know that Allah is not a description. It is a spark of light. Well, that, my friend, is a bit closer to the truth compared to Christianity. Buddha explains God as being a place of a nirvana. So that represents that when man goes through the 7 steps of Gautama Buddha's birth, that means man is what we are today. We go through the 7 chakras and reach to enlightenment. You become Buddha. You are the place of nothingness. So in Christianity, Jesus taught people. Those who see Jesus as a real character, carry on, that's fine. Other people see it as the sunlight in the sky, that's fine too. But here's the truth. The story that's written about it, the metaphor, the allegory story that you need to know about, is that he even said that when you stop using the eyes and you stop the thoughts, then you'll meet God. When you go on the search for God, you'll find yourself. When you go on the search for yourself, you'll find God. So God itself is the pineal gland. It's the master brain part of the whole program we're living in. And when you go through a lot of the cultures, you actually realize they're all saying the same thing. They recognize that the pineal gland, the Egyptians, the eye of Horus or the eye of Ra is the same image but mirrored. And that in itself represents A, the sun, which is the all light, or B, the pineal gland, because that's what it is, sliced in half. It's very cleverly done. So throughout the ages, they knew the truth. God is your brain connection. Yeah. It's the pineal gland. There isn't an outside source sitting there which is watching over us doing its thing. So that's how I'd like to break the truth down with that. And there's so much to back it up. This stuff is mostly found in the esoteric world, which is hidden from the masses for a reason.
It is occulted. Yeah. And those like, that's all also goes back to the basic, very basic Hermetic principles. Of course, that is within as it is as, you know, without that which is above is as is below. Yeah. I recently visited the Embassy of the Free Mind in Amsterdam. It's incredibly beautiful Hermetic occult museum. Everyone's who is into that. I can
about the Rickman. Did you go to the Rickman Library? No.
No. Unfortunately, Rickman. No. Unfortunately, not. No.
Well, look it up, guys.
They do have a major library upstairs with everything, you know, Hermeticism, Rosenkreuz, Rosicrucians, alchemy. I've had at least 2 different alchemists on my own show. But the Embassy of the Free Mind in Amsterdam is incredible if you love this kind of stuff.
No, it's beautiful, and that is true. And these things are available for the public now, which is better, which is why people can go and start to. This was part of the awakening in the world. It's part of the truth that these things were available. In the Jewish community, they had a secret for thousands of years, which they've kept. For example, Adoni, which is Adam in the beginning, if you want to call it, was created at the age of 40 to come into the Garden of Eden to name all the animals and plants. Now, in their culture, they don't like certain things being taught to others until they're the age of 40. They'll go to the woods and teach them special rituals and special things. That in itself was broken in 2015 because it became to that time on the earth to do so. And you put all these things together and it's a magical time. And it's almost like for people to go about their normal day life, what we would have known as normal 6 years ago, it's almost like it's catching up with you one way or another. People are going to get the shock to wake up to one thing or another. And it's a beautiful, beautiful time for that. Yeah. But again, it's going to be painful because that's how humans progress and learn. And I find it, but in back in Amsterdam, there's a place called the Rickman Library. If you've not heard of it, what that guy has done is amazing. He's got all the most important esoteric books from around the world, and even the most sacred of all these books that may have never left the Pacific Museum have now gone to him because of what he's done. He's like the living day version of Alexander the Great by getting all these archives.
That's the new Library of Alexandria, basically. What was it called? Did you say?
RIT, R-I-T, I think, Rittman or Rittman, I think, Rittman Library, Holland, so it'd be Holland, wouldn't it? Amsterdam. Obviously, we know about the Vatican and certain places that probably aren't on record anywhere in the world that do have things kept. But for what's available to the public, this guy's really done bloody well, and it's one of my bucket lists to go there and spend some time in that place, because, you know, I learned so much from the esoteric world, if you want, over my life, and it changes your perspective and your knowledge. Here's something else, people. In regards to the word knowledge, is important. To take on knowledge and grow your knowledge, you need to recognize and accept how little you know. And not just now, but forever. As soon as you think you know it all, you don't have knowledge, you've lost it.
Yeah.
You have to always accept how little you know and be willing to learn and take in anything and everything. Same for wisdom. To be wise, man must seek nothing other than wisdom. And that's it, you know, and this is what my life path's about. And I find in the Matrix, we do get lost there, you know, with the general day-to-day things happening in the world. And it is, to do this sort of talk for me is beautiful, because it's like, that's what I've always enjoyed doing in my life. My whole show was about doing this sort of stuff. And of course, I get drawn into the outside world because that's the duty for the physical plane.
Yeah,
Sure.
I looked up the Rittman Library real quick, and that is actually located in the Embassy of the Free Mind. So I have been there. It is
Perfect.
vast. It is incredibly vast.
Well, there you go. Jump in on that. I've got to
thousands.
ask you, because I have to. My name is UAP Lee, so I'll be amiss, and no doubt my fans would never forgive me if I didn't. So, I mean, you've let me into a whole new world. I mean, stuff that we've touched on before. You know, Guy Henderson, he's talked about Tartaria on the show. We've talked about, you know, awakening with Mark Christopher Lee and what that means with human consciousness. And now, and obviously everything that you've talked about, where do you stand on the non-human intelligence side of things? I mean, where do you see aliens fitting into all this? The crazy stuff we see in the skies, the unexplained science and basically physics that we just don't understand. Our science seems... There seems to be a lot of scientists within the complex, the military complex, the ones that would be working on deep state, that keep information to themselves, and civilian scientists, sort of people like you and me, that just went down there and want to know stuff. They're very frustrated with that deep state because they can't learn. It seems we've hit a brick wall with physics. So where do you stand with aliens and NHI, the tech, the reverse engineered stuff? Please do. Bring us in.
Okay. So I know someone that I can pass on to you as well that will also do a video with you, called John Hanson.
Right.
John Hanson was a 30-year police officer and police sergeant in the UK. He has many books called The Haunted Skies. John Hanson, and his wife was called Dawn. I think she was also an author involved. So I had a run-in with John Hanson many years ago, because I was part of a group sighting that didn't just last for minutes. It lasted for a good half an hour, and a whole group of people stood there watching it. Then it was erased from our memories, and we all didn't talk about it when we went back in the property. There was over 2,000 phone calls to the police. People crashed with their family. One person crashed with his family into a building because they were looking at it. So when that happened, and a few days later, I was with a group of friends, and then something got brought to my attention, and it triggered this thought of me standing in the garden with all these people looking at something. And I was like, is that a dream or real? So then you ring one up. Was we in the garden the other day? Then you wake them up to it. And they're like, oh my God. I'm like, how did we forget that? And then this thing happens. That's when it changed the game from a normal sight into something we shouldn't have seen, because it affected us in a way, whatever. I had to go meet this guy called John Hanson. There was also another guy that I had to deal with called Nick Pope, who was
I know
allegedly, the Ministry of Defence of the UK sort of thing. And he ran the group that was called, or is the head of this group called Bufora, which is Birmingham UFO Organisation or something. And I didn't know, because he was above it, owning it, he directed what information would and would not be leaked from it to the public.
So essentially he was Luis Elizondo, and he was Richard Doty. He was the British version of Richard Doty. He was the guy that gave the misinformation, decided what people knew and what didn't know. He was worked in the MOD to do that specific job.
And because of my critical thinking, I spoke to everyone that was with me that day. And the story goes like this. Where I live was up quite a far big hill. And about half a mile from my house was a shop. My sister was coming around to my house. I was always the open house where all my friends and stuff come. She came out the shop and her girlfriend was quite a biggish girl. Not someone that wants to run far, put it that way. In a fair way of putting it. They looked up in the sky and they seen this thing. And my sister was like, fit as a fiddle. She's like, gotta run to my brothers quick. UFO, UFO. So they run for 5 minutes or so and, sweating their butts off to get there. Door gets knocked. I'm in the conservatory of all my mates in the back of the house. My daughter's mum at the time goes to open the front door. My sister's there panicking. Look at this, look at this. And, she goes out and looks in the sky. Then she comes running through to the conservatory, bangs it, opens it and goes, quick, UFO. I almost looked and laughed as in like, shut up. That's embarrassing for me. Like you know what I mean? The partner's talking about UFOs. I was like, shut up, right? But all my mates went out one after the other. Like rapid following her, like they were excited. And I was the last one to walk out the front door. As I've come out the front door, those that already stood there looking at it are not speaking. They stood up looking at it, their mouths aren't moving, and they stood there like zombies. I remember everything. I stood there and looked at him, then I looked up like that, and then all of a sudden it caught my attention, and I've just stared at it roughly for about 2 minutes. And then it's almost like one after the other, we walked back inside. No one spoke of it, everyone went about their business, and it was it. But during that moment in Bromsgrove, Redditch, and the areas I live, there was over 2,000 phone calls to the police that people witnessed it in the sky. It was a humongous, what would look like a half-moon shape, that was sliced in the middle, so it looked more of a bird beak.
And was it on its side?
But it was changing shape.
Ah.
No, it was like the flat bit at the top and the bottom bit coming round, almost like a fin off a surfboard.
Right.
So it's icing that part there. So what happened was, when I was looking at it, it was like a weird glowy sort of shape, and it was what they call a twilight when the sun's disappearing in the background.
Yeah.
So eventually, when I'd woken up to it, started questioning all my family and the people that were there and getting them to remember them, getting them to draw what they thought they seen, put it all together, and then I got a phone call off someone, and this guy called John Hanson wanted to speak to me, ex-police or whatever, and it's very important because I was, I was onto something and I seen something I should have. I don't know. This is what I do know. What he said is I seen was a government craft. And during the moment of us seeing it was invisible to the eye because it's under a cloak of technology cloak. And the part that we seen is the electromagnetic absorber of the force around it to do its work. And because the sun was disappearing in the background and it's going over the horizon or whatever was happening, the sun, it disappeared in that twilight moment. It was changing its output from being day cloak to night invisibility, I suppose. And that's kind of what was going on, and we seen the malfunction of it.
Right.
So him himself took my reports, which is in one of the books, and then he got reports of other people. And because he worked for the police force, he had connections in the police to speak to as well about all the phone calls. And it's quite a big thing. But what happened after that was he told me that dealing with this Birmingham UFO org, which were getting involved, they wanted everyone's reports, was to see if anyone had pictures or videos. Because that's all they cared about. They didn't care about the testimony. Exactly.
Yeah, now let me tell you a story, right? Why I can add some credibility to that. There was a story about a UFO in Calvine in Scotland. This is one of the most incredible pictures of a UFO ever taken by man. There was two hikers took the picture. I'm just going to summarize it really quick. They took the picture, these two hikers. They went back to the hostel that they were staying at plus working, told people there what they'd seen. The guy in the kitchen, they went out for a cigarette. This guy's turned up in this black car. It was absolutely hammering it down with rain. They took the guy's cameras and all the rest of it. Little did they know that they'd given one of the stills to an RAF press officer. Some years later, that picture was then surfaced and it was collected, given to James Fawkes, who's a UFO investigator now. But those stills that were confiscated by the men in black, one of those images was blown up and was above Nick Pope's desk in the MOD. So that adds the credibility to what you just said there. The only thing that they wanted was the footage and the pictures to confiscate. So that adds credence to this very existence of this clandestine service men in black that go around confiscating this evidence to stop people talking about it. So please carry on. This is incredible.
Well, I do believe in extraterrestrial life, and I do believe that. And I do, when people see the idea of a vision of a grey alien, I would also sit there and say, because the reason why that's visualized a lot is because people have DMT or certain psychedelics. And that then is triggering what I know to be your DNA memory. Things that have been amongst us or walked amongst us, or what we may have been once in previous epochs or time. But when we see things happening now, I would class it more as an interdimensional experience. I'm not saying that when we have stories of people being abducted, and I don't look into that side too much because I feel that's a bit more storytelling in that way. But I'm not saying it hasn't happened for those that may have experienced it. But my point is, everything's of the mind. The Hermetic Order states this. So I presume that when we have these encounters or things that multiple people are seeing in this sort of planetary matrix we're living in, it's malfunctions and multidimensional time scales almost interlocking and clashing. And then you'll watch something like the documentary called Stephen Greer, Unacknowledged, or The Fifth Kind. I don't know if you've seen them.
Yeah, I've seen.
Oh, write them down, guys. Write it down.
Yeah, I've watched it.
Unacknowledged.
Yeah, I've seen.
The Fifth Kind, I think it's called Paranormal. Yeah. Not Paranormal, The Fifth Kind. It's called just The Fifth Kind. Stephen Greer. And them documentaries, they call it CE5.
Yeah.
So around 2019, I spent thousands and thousands of pounds in night vision technology, in amazing telescopes. I'd have 13 tripods in my garden with all different things on it. And I had my green lasers, and I was getting videos, which I can still access for you now on my laptops, of things moving in the sky that were not the satellites, they were not visible to other cameras, but they were visible on certain spectrums. And that meant then that wherever these things were moving around in rapid speeds and changing directory, it's almost like they're there, but they're not physical. It sounds weird. So it's almost like a spiritual point of view. It's either like the camera's picking up on something and it's moving at incredible rates and stuff, but then it's almost like not a physical object.
We've spoken about this before.
Class as an orb.
Yeah, we spoke about this before, and this is why one of the military guys in Vietnam said that they banned red light with some of the night vision, because the visibility of the spectrum of red light was causing the soldiers to see all these crazy shit flying around. So they changed it to green. That's why night vision has never been red since. So they say. But again, that just adds credence to something that you said there with interdimensional beings. And that's something that's big in the UAP community. It's been mentioned a lot recently, the interdimensional beings. There is other stuff out there. At the moment, there's brand new, basically, data in the last few weeks even that's come up. Beatrice Villarreal is a she studied and found data looking at previous images from before we put Sputnik up there to see these so-called transients, these things that were flying around in our atmosphere before satellites or mankind had put anything up there. And there's hundreds of thousands of records of these things moving in patterns and orbits that shouldn't be there, basically. And this is data that's sort of been shown now, and it's under peer review. But it sort of leads to an interesting conclusion that we haven't got yet, but a lot of people are jumping to. And then again, we're talking about first-hand whistleblowers like Jake Barber. They talk about things that you've just spoke about. They call it psionic. You call it CE5. Others do call it CE5. He calls it psionic. And it's a case of a lot of these crafts that people see up there flying around, moving about, they're not controlled by a physical being within. It's all from the mind, the conscious. And that's how Jake Barber has witnessed. And that's one of the techniques that they're using on the Skywatcher program, which is currently undergoing, to bring craft in or to lure them in using psionics, they call it. People with a little bit of on-red extra power, people that can step into those astral planes, remote view as they called it, and can sort of command these things down so they can be studied. And Jake Barber said, as a helicopter pilot for various aerospace companies in the US, he's gone out as a pilot, captured these craft, underslung them underneath the helicopter and brought them back for analysis to be driven away. And they've been experimented on, and various aerospace companies may have that reverse technology now. And that's sort of a lot of people think why the information's been suppressed. because having that kind of technology would essentially lead to the breakdown of everything that they hold dear, the energy sector. Their monopoly on mankind basically would crumble, because we wouldn't need them anymore to provide energy for bills and, you know, all the rest of it. Their system would collapse. So there's a lot of people that think that's why a lot of this UAP and alien stuff's been suppressed. It's because of the ramifications of us knowing that the technology is there to achieve energy, basically, to draw it in from these other dimensions, the quantum field, as scientists would call it, different layers of energy, maybe you would call it. But yeah, it's just, there's things, the similarities that you mentioned there. I mean, I put that to you again as a counter comment. I don't know why you want to say anything on that.
I believe, yeah, I 100%, because it was my most exciting part of my life, and my videos were so geeky. You'd love my old soul for doing it. I used to be really geeky with my UFO hunting videos.
Yeah,
I loved it. And I do believe that regardless, if we look at the heliocentric model of space and, you know, the universe, we cannot be the only planet with life or intelligent life. There's 2 billion planets within our galaxy, and then there's 2 trillion galaxies within the next, you know what I mean, size up. And it's like, you look, put them together, there has to be something else. And as some of the old greats would say, we're just a hostile planet. We're a hostile species, and, you know, if there is such thing as intelligence, it won't come with violence, is how I like to believe in it as well. I'm like, you know what, it makes perfect sense, because if they had intelligence and they were violent, they would already be taking us out. So I like to see it that way, that they are working with certain people, that they can feel the vibrations off, and being good people that are just interested and, you know, lucky enough to maybe connect. And then there's the other spectrum of just generally on the odd occasion, people are going to see something, and hopefully it does get wiped away, because, you know, maybe they do work with the governments, maybe they don't. But whichever way I look at it, like the Federation Galaxy government sort of aspect of it, there's like theories about the government's working with them, isn't there? They call it the Galactic Federation, don't they, or something?
Well, your friend Stephen Greer believes that. Stephen Greer believes that this 3i Atlas, and he's been saying it for years now, is that the government is going to unleash something on that's called Project Bluebeam, and that is essentially this creation of an alien threat that doesn't exist to mankind, and that we all need to unite been underneath a new world order that is essentially being brought upon us by the Majestic 12, who are these people who run the world and all of the industry and basically everything. And they're going to bring us under the illusion of this threat, this ET threat. That's what Stephen Greer says, and he is urging, obviously, the people not to believe this threat. It's all rubbish. That they said the ETs or the NHI that are coming here, they're not a threat to us. They're here to help us. Then they're here to sort of elevate us to that next level of consciousness and to assist mankind, not to destroy us as these evil entities in the deep state would have us believe, hence the need for this suppression. So a lot of people think that this catastrophic disclosure is coming where the state's not going to release this information. They're not going to bring us into it. However, there's going to be this mass awakening, which we're seeing now, that's going to force the hand of the people, as in people, whistleblowers that have been within this section, the deep state, force these people to come out with evidence and show this, and, you know, and or worse, something lands and exposes itself to us in a way that makes this just way out of the control of the deep state, and it is a catastrophic disclosure, and basically religions collapse. Maybe, you know, societies fall apart. Maybe they think, oh my God, we're free, we can do something different, you know, we're all free. Maybe that frees mankind. But that's what sort of Stephen Greer sort of thinks of as the whole thing, this alien threat, it doesn't exist, and that's where we are with it. And I know you've mentioned it, and that's sort of where he was leading from the unacknowledged documentaries and his more recent stuff.
I think for you, Lee, I need to get you in touch with John Hanson, because I've been to his archives, and his books were based upon the last 100 years. And it weren't 100 years of people like me or you. It's 100 years worth of pilots, people, captains of ships, credible people in the system that had significant evidence and experiences and whatnot with, you know, the UFOs and whatnot. And that's why he's got all these documents. A very important person to that sort of stuff. Because obviously mixing like the two esoteric sort of stuff and then the sort of aliens, well, the aliens, it's almost like people, like certain viewers would be like, beautiful, like a bit of multi-category, but I suppose it can almost clash a little bit. which is true, but I think it's brilliant. But you will love John because, honestly, he was a 30-year police officer and sergeant, and private investigator and detective. And then, of course, the reason why they left the force was because him and 6 other officers turned up to an incident where there was an alien craft, or a spacecraft, we'll call it, landing in a field next to their farmland. They all approached it, the police officers. They all got to witness it together. They all, like, blown away with what they just witnessed and everything. And then when they went back to do a report on it, of course, people come into the room and it's explained to them, you're never allowed to speak of this ever again because of the impact it would have on the police force. Would look like a load of loons, and everything's shut down on the spot. Well, him as a man was like, no, I know what I saw. That'll never be taken from me. And then he left the force eventually and became a ufologist and an author for these things. It was a beautiful experience to see the stuff he's got, and I think it'll be a really good connection for you to go deep into some of these things and the mysteries involved, you know, involved with all this sort of stuff.
Well, we've had Gary
levitating
Heseltine on
stones and all
before.
stuff, yeah.
I don't know if you know who Gary Heseltine is. He was the chief investigator on the Rendlesham case. And he
he's worked with him then.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
So he's dug deep into that. And he's mentioned it before, being an policeman himself. I'd love to make the John Hanson connection. If you could make that happen, that'd be fantastic. I'd appreciate that.
I can make that happen.
Rich, I'm not going to lie to you,
make that happen.
mate.
And not only that.
Oh, go on.
Oh, you there?
Yeah, mate.
I've got his number as well, so I'll be able to drop him a message. I'll drop him a message so you can get that and speak to John. And obviously also, if you'd like to do some sort of chat or some esoteric talks down
That's
the line,
what I was going to say.
Do some deeper talks and that stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, this has been I want to start tying a bow on it now just because I'm very wary of time. However, like as you just said, this has taken some crazy right and left turns. We've gone from bounce to bounce to bounce, from topic to topic. It's been brilliant, actually. It's been way better than I expected. With that being said, I'd love to get you back on again for exactly what you've just said there. There's way more we can jump into. So yeah, I'm sure Stein's licking his lips. He'll want to know that. Pick your brain on a lot of different things.
Man, I need to get you on the Grey Iron Pagans.
Yeah, don't stand up, mate. He's probably not even got his trousers on at this point, Rich.
I know some beautiful history of the pagans, and I know about all the gods. And if you start going up north and looking into some of the ancient gods like Waimea, the frost god, and it's a crazy thing what's happened to this planet. And I'm glad that we're all kind of connecting and bringing it to light now and understanding it, or understanding it for those that like that word.
It's certainly fun.
Man, there was so much more that I wanted to say about it, but like
that's why I'm trying to shut you up. Because I know where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'm a pagan. I'm occultist, hystericist. I love that shit, but I should get you on my own show for that.
100%. Yeah, if you could link us together, and then I'll also send in my mobile number after this, so you've got that as well, guys. And we'll get linked up, and we'll get to work and keep doing what we do. And I'll hook you up with some good ufologists.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we do on this show, mate, and one of the reasons we do this show, yes, we'd like to get into the topics that others don't go near, and it might put us at some point, I'm no doubt, when the viewership goes up further, in danger maybe at some stage. Who knows? That's what you hear about these things. So what? One of the things we do and talk about this stuff, or why we get into these subjects, because the more people that know about it, the more people that can share this information, the more that can start waking it. When we've talked about it on this podcast tonight, the awakening, it comes in many different forms, I think. And just realizing that we as people have a God-given right to our own freedoms and thoughts and feelings on this planet is one of those things that this show does, I believe. It gives people that willingness to want to do that. And having people like you on, mate, it makes all the difference. So the more we can talk about this stuff, the more guests that we can get on that can shed the light on the dark, it can only do good as far as I'm concerned. So what we'll do is we'll put all your links and everything in the description of this show. Rich, from me, Stijn can obviously tie a bow on it himself, but thanks a lot for coming on, mate. It's been brilliant, really enlightening stuff. Thanks a lot.
You too, Lee. Nice one. Thanks so much. We'll speak again soon as well.
This has been absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to get you on the Grey Iron Pagans to like really go into the occult and esoteric stuff. Like, yeah, I was indeed, like as Lee said, like pretty much fucking licking my lips. It's like, oh yeah, I'm about this, man. This has been really cool. I mean, like, but Lee, like, how often do we get that we have a guest who's like really like part of both worlds?
Oh yeah, very rarely.
We haven't had we haven't had that.
No,
often
we usually get a specialist
yet.
in something, but not somebody that dips his toe into a lot of it. It's great to, like I say, to be able to pluck that information from you on many different stuff, many different topics.
Yeah,
my controversial subjects group had 120,000 people on it, and the YouTube channel was massive. And just in one day, when I got arrested for doing the protesting and lockdown, sort of anti-lockdowns and whatnot during that time of the world. And what happened was I was in an interview, and I came out of the interview from the police station, and they put me under public order that I wasn't allowed to carry electrical devices in public. No mobile phones, no cameras, because of the impact I was having. Went to go on my YouTube, gone. Went to go on my Facebook, gone. I was like, oh, I really am above the target, and they've just made a message to me. Enough to enough. I was like, shit. But my show was called Controversial Subjects Unleashed, and I covered all topics, as any and every topic. That's why I suppose you get the vast spread of the puzzle.
Well, I'm grateful for it.
We'll make sure that all the links are in the description box down below. That all the links are provided. We'll have Andy, Doctor Not As Evil, also, or so he says. We'll have him do that. So Lee, Richard, guys, thank you very much for coming on. This has been a wild show, man. We went all over the place. This has really been cool. So for everyone watching, for everyone listening, thank you for sticking with us. This is, as I said, this has been one of the crazier ones. I can't imagine how it is if you're viewing this or listening to this. So thank you all very much for sticking with us. Do remember to like, share, subscribe, and if you are subscribed on YouTube, make sure that the notification bell is on so that whenever a new show uploads, you are notified, because I know from personal experience YouTube has a tendency to not tell you when another great episode is coming online. Find us on Instagram, Across the Pond. Find us on TikTok. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast, make sure to leave a 5-star rating. It's a small effort, but with great results. It means the world to us. And if you want everything neatly packed together, go to our website, acrossthepond.co.uk. I'm finally saying it right. Took me a bit. Everything is on there. The shows, the social media pages. So if you don't feel like, having 10 tabs open, just go to acrossthepond.co.uk. Everything is there. We will see you all next time for another amazing episode of Across the Pond podcast. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Much love, guys. Bye-bye.
Just in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Across the Pond.
This is a Fox News alert. The Epstein files have been released.
Across the Pond.
You're looking at now, sir. Everything that happens now is happening.
Very serious.
Now.